The funeral home was steeped in the cloying scent of lilies and raw, unfiltered grief. I stood beside my son's casket, my weathered hand resting on the polished walnut surface, unable to comprehend how Robert, my vibrant, strong-willed 35-year-old boy, could be lying there so still. My mind kept rejecting this new reality. Just last week, we'd been planning his summer visit, talking about teaching his children how to fish at the lake where I once taught him. Now, I was choosing flowers for his funeral. The doctor had called it a sudden cardiac arrest. These things sometimes happen, even to young, healthy people, he'd explained, as if that clinical description could possibly fill the gaping hole now torn through my life. I'm Irene Wilson, 68 years old, and I never imagined I would outlive my only son. As friends and family drifted around me like shadows, their voices hushed and their faces blurred by my tears, I felt adrift in an ocean of black clothing and hollow condolences. I'd been accepting sympathies for hours, my face frozen in that mask we all wear when we're desperately trying not to shatter in front of others. Through the fog of my grief, I noticed Mr. Harrison, Robert's attorney, approaching with a gentle, somber expression. "Irene," he said softly, touching my elbow, "when you're ready, we need to discuss some matters." I nodded numbly. Nothing seemed important anymore, certainly not business or legal issues, but I followed him to a small side room away from the receiving line. That's when I saw her, Diana, my daughter-in-law, huddled in the corner with her sister. My son had been so deeply in love with her. Even when they'd first started dating 10 years ago, I'd seen the way he looked at her, as if she held all the answers to questions he'd been asking his entire life. I was about to approach them when Diana's voice, sharper than I'd ever heard it, cut through the muffled atmosphere. "You know they're reading the will tomorrow, right?" she was whispering, but the room's acoustics carried her words clearly to where I stood. "I just hope he didn't leave anything substantial to Irene." Her sister murmured something I couldn't hear, and Diana continued, "I know. Right, I'm his wife. Everything should come to me." The bitterness in her voice was shocking. I've spent 7 years with him, putting up with his mother constantly being around, giving opinions on everything from our house to how we should raise the kids. I froze, my hand still on the doorframe, as her sister asked, "What if she expects to move in with you now?" Diana actually laughed here at my son's funeral. "I'd rather die, I mean it," she said, her voice dropping even lower. "I'm the one who has to pick up the pieces now. I'm the one who has to raise our children alone. I'm sure as hell not going to care for that old witch, too." The room spun around me. Old witch. Was that how she'd seen me all this time? I'd tried so hard to be respectful of their marriage, to only offer help when asked. I babysit my grandchildren 2 days a week so Diana could maintain her part-time job. I brought meals when Robert worked late. I thought we had a relationship built on mutual respect, if not affection. "The will reading will be tomorrow at 10 a.m., Mr. Harrison was saying, unaware of what I'd just overheard. "I wanted to prepare you, Irene. Robert made some changes to his will recently." I struggled to focus on his words, with Diana's cruel comments still ringing in my ears. "Changes?" I asked, my voice sounding distant even to myself. "Yes, about 3 weeks ago." He hesitated. "He transferred almost everything to you, Irene, not to Diana." I stared at him in disbelief. "But that doesn't make sense. Diana is his wife." "The children. He set up trust funds for the children that will mature when they turn 25. Harrison explained quietly. "But the house, his investments, The insurance money. It's all coming to you. He was quite explicit about it. My mind reeled. Why would Robert do this? He'd always been thoughtful, deliberate in his decisions. This wasn't some impulsive choice. Behind us, Diana had spotted me, her face shifting from annoyed to a practiced mask of grief, all traces of her earlier contempt vanishing. But I'd seen it now. The real Diana, the one who existed when she thought no one was watching. "Irene," she said, approaching with arms outstretched for an embrace. "I'm so sorry. We're all just trying to process this horrible loss." As she hugged me, her expensive perfume suffocating, all I could think was, my son knew, Shay. Somehow, Robert had known exactly who she was. And now, I was beginning to understand too. The reading of the will the next day was everything I dreaded, and more. We gathered in Mr. Harrison's office, a tastefully appointed room with leather chairs and walnut bookshelves that reminded me painfully of Robert's own study. Diana sat across from me at the conference table, dressed immaculately in a black pencil skirt and silk blouse. Her eyes were puffy from crying, but there was something calculated in the way she dabbed at them with a monogrammed handkerchief. I wore the same simple black dress I'd worn to the funeral, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. At 68, I felt every year of my age weighing on me, yet there was a strange new strength forming like a hard kernel in my chest. The conversation I'd overheard had changed something fundamental inside me. "Shall we begin, Mr. Harrison asked, spreading documents before him with practiced efficiency. His voice was gentle but businesslike, the voice of a man who had overseen many such readings, who understood that grief and money make for volatile companions. Diana nodded eagerly. Leaning forward, I simply inclined my head, not trusting my voice. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began reading the formal legal language that constituted my son's last wishes. I barely heard the initial paragraphs, lost in memories of Robert as a young man, signing his first apartment lease. So proud to have me review the document with him. And to my mother, Irene Wilson. I leave my primary residence at 1542 Maple Avenue. My investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $875,000, and the proceeds of my life insurance policy in the amount of $500,000. Diana's sharp intake of breath cut through the room like a knife. Her face transformed before my eyes, the mask of grief giving way to something raw and ugly. "That can't be right," as she interrupted, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "There must be some mistake." Mr. T. Harrison continued as if she hadn't spoken. "To my children, Sophie and Mason, I established trust funds of $250,000 each, to be administered by my mother until they reach the age of 25, at which time they will receive full control of their inheritances." "And what about me?" Diana demanded, her composure cracking. "I'm his wife. Where am I in all this, Mr. Harrison looked up from the document. "Mrs. Carson, your husband has left you the sum of $50,000 and his personal effects not otherwise specified." The color drained from Diana's face. $50,000, that's it. After 7 years of marriage, this can't be legal, she snapped, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the leather portfolio she'd brought. He was obviously not in his right mind. "I assure you, Mrs. Carson, your husband was of sound mind and body when he made these changes," Mr. Harrison said, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who'd weathered many family disputes. He was quite adamant about his decisions. "When," Diana demanded, "when did he do this?" The changes were made and properly witnessed on April 12th. Mr. Harrison replied. I felt a chill run through me, April 12th, just 3 weeks before Robert's death. What had happened to prompt such a drastic change? I'll contest it, Diana said, her voice rising. This is ridiculous. I have children to support, a lifestyle to maintain. You're certainly entitled to challenge the will. Mr. Goud Harrison acknowledged. However, I should inform you that Robert anticipated this possibility. He recorded a video statement explaining his decisions, which would be entered into evidence should the will be contested. Diana's eyes widened fractionally before narrowing again. A video, she repeated, and something in her tone, a hint of uncertainty, perhaps even fear, caught my attention. Yes, Harrison confirmed. He was quite thorough. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. I watched my daughter-in-law carefully, noting how her fingers had stopped their restless tapping on the portfolio. She was thinking, calculating, reassessing. I need time to consider my options, she finally said, gathering her things with quick, jerky movements. My lawyer will be in touch. The drive home afterward was a blur. Diana had stormed out of the office, refusing to speak to me. Part of me wanted to reach out, to try to understand, to maintain some connection to my grandchildren. But the memory of her words at the funeral, I'm sure as hell not going to care for that old witch, kept me silent. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my hands were still shaking. Not from fear or grief this time, but from a growing suspicion. Robert wouldn't have changed his will so dramatically without good reason. He had always been fair, thoughtful, meticulous in his planning. He'd adored Diana from the moment they met, or at least, he'd adored the woman he thought she was. What had he discovered in those final weeks? What had prompted him to protect his assets, and potentially me, from the woman he had once loved, enough to marry, inside my empty house? I moved to the kitchen and mechanically put on a kettle for tea, a lifetime habit when troubled. As the water heated, I stared out the window at the garden Robert had helped me plant last spring. The azaleas were blooming now, vibrant pink against the green foliage, oblivious to the fact that the hands that had planted them were gone forever. What were you trying to tell me, son? I whispered to the empty room. What did you know? The kettle whistled, startling me back to the present. Whatever secrets Robert had taken to his grave, I was now certain of one thing: my son had tried to protect me, and somehow I would need to discover why. 3 days after the will reading, I stood in Robert's home office, surrounded by the remnants of my son's life. Diana had reluctantly given me the key, claiming she couldn't bear to sort through his things yet. In reality, I suspected she was avoiding me, still seething from the revelation of the will's contents. She and the children had gone to stay with her parents for a few days, giving me space to collect Robert's personal effects, though I knew it was more about her needing distance from the house that was now legally mine. The home felt hollow, abandoned. Family photos still lined the hallway, Robert and Diana on their wedding day. Little Sophie losing her first tooth, Mason taking his first steps. Happy moments, frozen in time, now calling into question everything I thought I knew about their marriage. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds of Robert's study, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. This room had always been his sanctuary. I remembered how he'd sit here on Sunday afternoons when the children were napping, working on whatever project had captured his imagination that week. The leather chair behind the desk still held the impression of his body. I ran my fingers along the edge of his desk, recalling how excited he'd been when he bought it after his first big promotion. Solid oak, he'd said proudly. This'll last a lifetime. Mom. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me now. That's when I noticed the drawer was slightly ajar, with a small key still in the lock. Robert had always been meticulous about security. He wouldn't have left it unlocked unless he wanted someone to find what was inside. My hands trembled as I pulled the drawer open. Inside was a thick manila folder labeled simply, Financial Records. I hesitated. Should I be prying into his private affairs? But something compelled me to open it. After all, he had left everything to me. If there were secrets here, perhaps I was meant to find them. What I found inside made my blood run cold. Credit card statements, loan applications, bank notices, dozens of them spanning the last 2 years. And paper clipped to the front was a handwritten note in Robert's neat, precise handwriting. "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner." Tears blurred my vision as I sifted through the documents. The story they told was devastating. Diana had been systematically draining their accounts for months, maybe years. Cash withdrawals at casinos, online gambling sites, luxury purchases returned for cash, and loans, so many loans taken out in Robert's name, some with interest rates that made me gasp. "Oh, Robert," I whispered, my heart breaking all over again. "Why didn't you tell me?" As if in answer, a small USB drive fell from between the papers. With shaking hands, I plugged it into Robert's computer and found a single video file dated just 3 weeks ago, the same time he'd changed his will. My son's face filled the screen, looking tired but resolute. I pressed my fingers to the monitor, aching to touch him one last time. "Mom," he began, his voice sending a fresh wave of grief through me. "If you're watching this, then things have probably gotten worse with Diana, and you're finding out everything the hard way. I'm sorry for that." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. I discovered Diana's gambling problem about 6 months ago. At first, I thought we could work through it. I got her into therapy, set up separate accounts, but it's deeper than I initially realized. He sighed heavily. "Last week, I found out she's been taking loans from some unsavory characters, people who don't exactly follow legal collection practices." My hand covered my mouth in horror. "I'm changing my will today," that he continued. "If something happens to me, you need to be protected. The house, the investments, they need to go to you. You'll make sure the kids are taken care of. I know that." His voice broke. "I love her. Mom, I still do. But I can't trust her with our future anymore." The video ended, and I sat in the gathering darkness of his office, the pieces finally falling into place. The sudden cardiac arrest that took my athletic, health-conscious son at just 35. The mysterious changes to his will. The venomous way Diana had spoken about me at the funeral. Had the stress of Diana's betrayal contributed to his heart attack, or was there something even more sinister at play? The thought made me shiver despite the warm spring air drifting through the window. A noise from the front of the house startled me. Footsteps in the hallway. Diana was back early. I quickly closed the computer and gathered the documents, slipping them into my bag. Whatever was happening here, I needed to be careful for my safety, for my grandchildren's future, and for Robert's memory. "Irene," Diana's voice called out, sweet and completely at odds with the woman I'd glimpsed at the funeral. "Are you still here? I brought dinner." I took a deep breath and stepped out of the office, clutching my son's secrets close. "I was just finishing up," I said, forcing a smile. "How thoughtful of you to bring food." Her eyes flickered to my bag, then back to my face, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Well, we're family, aren't we? We need to stick together now more than ever." As I followed her to the kitchen, one thought crystallized in my mind. My son had tried to protect me. Now it was my turn to protect what he'd left behind. 2 months after Robert's funeral, my world had shrunk to the size of my living room. The phone rarely rang anymore. The invitations to community events had stopped coming. My weekly bridge club had regretfully informed me that they were restructuring the groups. And somehow, there wasn't room for me anymore. I knew who was behind it all. Diana had always been popular in our small town of Millfield Charming, beautiful, and skilled at presenting herself as the perfect wife and mother. Now she was equally skilled at presenting herself as the grieving widow cruelly deprived of her rightful inheritance by a greedy mother-in-law. Did you hear what Irene did to poor Diana? I'd overheard Mrs. Pembroke whispering to another woman at the grocery store last week. Taking everything after Robert died, leaving Diana and those poor children with practically nothing. And after all Diana did, caring for Irene when she had that hip surgery last year. Her companion had replied with a disapproving click of her tongue. I'd abandoned my cart and left without the groceries I needed, my cheeks burning with humiliation. The narrative Diana had spun bore no resemblance to reality. She'd visited me exactly twice during my recovery from hip surgery, both times with Robert, staying less than an hour. But the community had embraced her story wholly, eager to believe the worst about me. Even worse was what she'd done with my grandchildren. Sophie, 9, and Mason, 6, had been the lights of my life. Before Robert's death, I'd seen them 3 or 4 times a week. Now my calls went unanswered, my messages unreturned. When I did manage to speak with them, they were distant and guarded. Last weekend, I'd finally confronted Diana about it when she dropped the children off for a rare visit. You'll only have them for 2 hours, she'd said, checking her watch. I have to take them to a birthday party later. And Diana, we need to talk about what's happening, I'd said, keeping my voice low so the children wouldn't hear from the backyard, where they were reluctantly exploring the swing set that had sat unused for weeks. Why are you turning everyone against me? Why are you keeping the children away? Her face had transformed, the pleasant mask slipping to reveal the cold calculation beneath. I don't know what you're talking about, Irene. Maybe people are just finally seeing you for who you really are, a controlling, selfish woman who couldn't let her son live his own life. That's not true, and you know it. I'd protested. Robert changed his will because he discovered what you were doing with your gambling. She'd laughed, but I saw panic flash in her eyes. Is that the story you're telling people now? My God, Irene, listen to yourself. First you steal my inheritance. Now you're inventing addictions for me. No wonder nobody wants to be around you anymore. She'd stepped closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Let me make something perfectly clear. Those are my children. If you want to see them at all, you'll keep your crazy accusations to yourself, and you'll start transferring Robert's assets back where they belong to me. That night, after they'd left, I'd sat alone in my kitchen, a cup of tea growing cold in front of me. The silence of the house pressed in from all sides. For the first time since Robert died, I allowed myself to cry deep, racking sobs that left me gasping for breath. The isolation was working. I'd started to question myself, to wonder if I was the villain in this story. Maybe I had been too controlling. Maybe Robert had changed his will for other reasons. Maybe Diana's gambling wasn't as serious as I'd thought. The next morning, I found myself in Dr. Bennett's office. He'd been our family doctor for 20 years, had watched Robert grow from a teenager into a man. Surely he at least wouldn't have turned against me. But as he examined me, his manner was cool, professional, where it had once been warm and friendly. You seem anxious, Irene, as he said, making notes in my chart without meeting my eyes. Having trouble sleeping. Yes, I admitted. I've been under a lot of stress since Robert died. He nodded, still not looking at me. Diana mentioned she's concerned about your mental state. Said you've been making some strange accusations, having trouble distinguishing fact from fiction. My blood ran cold. Diana talked to you about me. She's worried, he said simply. She thinks you might be in the early stages of dementia. The paranoia, the mood swings, the irrational behavior with the will. I'm not. I struggled to find words, shocked by how thoroughly Diana had poisoned even this relationship. Doctor, Bennett finally met my eyes. I'm prescribing you something for anxiety, and I'd like you to see a neurologist, just to rule things out. I left with a prescription I had no intention of filling, and the crushing realization that Diana was systematically destroying not just my reputation but my credibility. If she succeeded in convincing people I was becoming mentally incompetent, what would stop her from challenging the will on those grounds? As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. We need to talk about Diana. Meet me at Riverside Cafe tomorrow at 10 Huzure. Come alone. Jenny. Diana's sister wanted to meet me. My heart raced as I reread the message. After months of isolation, could I finally have found an ally that night? I pulled out Robert's documents again, spreading them across my kitchen table. I wasn't crazy. The evidence was right here, bank statements showing thousands withdrawn at casinos, credit card bills for luxury items that had mysteriously disappeared from their home, loans from companies I'd never heard of, with interest rates that bordered on criminal. I won't let her win, I whispered to the empty room, to the photo of Robert that sat on my mantel. I won't let her erase what you tried to do. Tomorrow, I would meet Jenny, and maybe, just maybe, I would finally begin to fight back. Riverside Cafe sat on the edge of town, far enough away that Diana and her friends weren't likely to spot me there. The morning air was crisp as I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, my mind racing with possibilities. What did Jenny want? Could I trust her? Or was this some elaborate trap set by Diana? I arrived early, choosing a corner table with my back to the wall where I could see everyone who entered. The waitress brought me coffee with a smile that held no judgment or pity, the first such smile I'd received in weeks. Exactly at 10, Jenny walked in. She was Diana's younger sister, but they couldn't have been more different. Where Diana was polished and perfect, Jenny was natural and relaxed. Today, she wore jeans and a simple sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She spotted me immediately and walked over, sliding into the seat across from me without a greeting. "Did anyone see you come here?" she asked, her voice low. I shook my head. "I don't think so. Why all the secrecy? What's this about, Jenny?" She took a deep breath, fidgeting with the paper napkin in front of her. "I've been wanting to talk to you since the funeral, but Diana watches me like a hawk. She knows I've never approved of how she treats people." The waitress approached, and Jenny ordered coffee, waiting until we were alone again before continuing. "Irene, I need you to know that I believe you about everything, the gambling, the loans, all of it." My hands trembled as I set my cup down. "You do, but how?" "Because I've seen it before." Jenny's expression hardened. This isn't the first time Diana has done this. Before she met Robert, she was engaged to a man named Derek, wealthy family, good prospects. She nearly destroyed him financially before his parents intervened. A dull roar filled my ears as Jenny continued, explaining how Diana had exhibited these patterns their entire lives, finding vulnerable people, charming them, then exploiting them for her own gain. "Our parents enabled it," Jenny said, disgust evident in her voice. They thought her beauty and charm were her gifts, and they should be used to secure her future. They encouraged her to find wealthy men, to do whatever it took to maintain a certain lifestyle. But she seemed to love Robert, I protested weakly. They appeared happy. Jenny's smile was sad. Diana is an excellent actress, and maybe she did love him in her way. But when she loves something, she consumes it. She takes and takes until there's nothing left. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. I've been documenting everything the lies she's told about you, the way she's manipulated the children, the community. She told our parents you were abusive to Robert throughout his childhood, that you controlled him with money. The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. Why would she say these things? Because she's desperate, Jenny said simply. Whatever Robert discovered, it must have been bad, really bad. She needs that inheritance. Irene, not just for the lifestyle, but to cover her tracks. What tracks? I asked, a chill running through me. Jenny hesitated. I don't have proof, just suspicions. But I think some of the people Diana borrowed from aren't just loan sharks. I think they might be connected to more serious criminals. The cafe suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Are you saying... I'm saying you need to be careful, Jenny cut in. Diana isn't just spreading rumors to be petty. She's methodically destroying your credibility because she's afraid of what you might discover. The dementia story, classic Diana. She did the same thing to our grandmother when the old lady caught her stealing jewelry. She's gaslighting me, I said, the term coming from an article I'd read years ago, making me doubt my own sanity. Exactly, Jenny nodded vigorously, and she's good at it. She's had plenty of practice. As we talked, Jenny gave me a small burner phone with her number programmed in it. Use this to contact me. Don't use your regular phone. I wouldn't put it past her to have someone monitoring your calls. That evening, as I sorted through more of Robert's papers at home, I found something I'd missed before, a small key taped to the back of his desk drawer with a note that simply said, Storage Unit Number 17, Main Street, Lock and Key. Whatever Robert had discovered about Diana, whatever had prompted him to change his will so drastically, the evidence might be sitting in that storage unit. Tomorrow, I would find out what my son had been hiding and what Diana was so desperate to keep buried. Main Street Lock and Key was a nondescript building on the edge of downtown, the kind of place you could drive past 100 times without noticing. The morning air was crisp as I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, clutching Robert's key in my hand. My heart pounded with anticipation and fear. What would I find inside? The facility manager barely glanced at my ID before directing me to unit number 17, a small storage space at the end of a dimly lit hallway. The lock turned with a satisfying click, and I pulled up the rolling metal door. Inside, neatly organized and labeled, were dozens of boxes. But what caught my eye immediately was a large whiteboard propped against the back wall, covered in Robert's precise handwriting. It was a timeline stretching back 3 years, documenting Diana's activities in meticulous detail: cash withdrawals, casino visits, online gambling accounts, unexplained absences. Each entry was annotated with dates, amounts, and sometimes photographs. "Oh, Robert," I whispered, tracing my fingers over his handwriting. "You were investigating her." One box was labeled simply, Evidence. Inside, I found bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, all carefully organized. But it was the USB drive at the bottom that made my hand shake. I slipped it into my pocket, knowing I needed to review it somewhere private. The storage unit contained something else too, a leather-bound journal. The first entry was dated 3 years ago, just after Sophie's 6th birthday. The final entry was dated 4 days before Robert's death. I confronted Diana today, showed her what I found. She denied everything at first, then became hysterical. Says I don't understand the pressure she's been under. She's right, I don't understand how anyone could gamble away our children's future, could put us in debt to the kind of people who make threats. She begged me not to tell anyone, especially not Mom. Said she'd get help, that we could work through this. I want to believe her, for the kids' sake. I need to believe her. But I've changed the will today, just in case. If anything happens to me, Mom will make sure the kids are protected. Tears blurred my vision as I closed the journal. Robert had known everything and had confronted Diana just 4 days before his sudden cardiac arrest. I spent hours in that storage unit, photographing documents, reading through Robert's notes, assembling the pieces of a puzzle I'd never wanted to solve. By the time I left, slipping the most crucial evidence into my purse, I was a different woman than the one who had arrived that morning. The fog of grief and self-doubt had burned away, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. Diana had to be stopped, not just for me, but for my grandchildren. That afternoon, I called Jenny from the burner phone. I found Robert's evidence. I told her, my voice steadier than it had been in months. It's worse than we thought. I think Diana might have had something to do with Robert's death. Jenny's sharp intake of breath was audible. That's a serious accusation, Irene. I know, and I can't prove it. Not yet. But Robert confronted her about the gambling just days before he died. And look at how systematically she's worked to discredit me since then. She's terrified I'll discover the truth. What are you going to do? Jenny asked. Fight back, I said simply. Will you help me? 2 days later, Jenny and I met with Dr. Carlson, a respected neurologist in the next town over, someone with no connection to Diana or her social circle. I underwent a complete workup, cognitive tests, brain scans, the works. Mrs. Wilson, Dr. A. Carlson said when the results came back, I can state with absolute certainty that you show no signs of dementia or cognitive impairment. In fact, your mental acuity is exceptional for a woman of any age. I asked for his findings in writing, which he provided, along with a statement addressing the concerns that had been raised about my mental state. Next, I hired a private investigator named Marcus, a referral from Jenny. He was expensive, but with access to Robert's money, that was no longer a concern. I need documentation of everything Diana is doing, I told him. The rumors she's spreading, the people she's meeting with, all of it, and I need to know who she borrowed money from. As Marcus began his work, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since before Robert's death. No longer was I the victim in this story. I was reclaiming my narrative, my reputation, and most importantly, my role in my grandchildren's lives. Diana had underestimated me, treating me like a helpless old woman she could easily manipulate and discard. She was about to discover just how wrong she was. Meanwhile, I began rebuilding my social connections, starting with Barbara, my oldest friend who had withdrawn from me after hearing Diana's rumors. I've missed you, I said simply when she cautiously accepted my invitation to coffee. Barbara looked uncomfortable, twisting her napkin in her hands. I heard some things, Irene, about how you treated Robert, about the will. I slid Dr. Carlson's report across the table. Diana has been telling people I have dementia. This proves I don't. She's also told people I was abusive to Robert. I have decades of birthday cards, letters, and photographs that show otherwise. I met Barbara's eyes. She's destroying my reputation because she's afraid of what I know. Barbara studied the neurologist's report, then looked up at me with dawning comprehension. She seemed so sincere when she told me how worried she was about you. She's an excellent actress, I said, echoing Jenny's words. It's what makes her so dangerous. Slowly, methodically, I began to reclaim my life. I joined a new bridge club in the neighboring town. I volunteered at the library where the head librarian, who had never liked Diana, welcomed me warmly. I started a blog documenting my journey as a widow, carefully writing about my grief without mentioning the darker currents beneath. Each small victory strengthened me. Each piece of evidence Marcus uncovered, and there were many confirmed what I already knew. Diana was desperate, dangerous, and coming undone. The final piece fell into place when Marcus discovered who had loaned Diana money, a man named Vincent Carrera, who had connections to organized crime in Chicago. She owes him over $200,000, Marcus told me gravely, and his kind don't extend payment terms. 2 days later, I invited Diana and the children to dinner. It was time for a confrontation, but this time I would be the one in control. As I set the table that evening, I felt oddly calm. The doorbell rang, and I squared my shoulders, ready to face the woman who had tried to destroy me. Diana arrived, all perfect makeup and forced smiles, the children trailing behind her. Grandma Sophie cried, running to hug me. At 9, she was still young enough to be openly affectionate. Mason, at 6, hung back, eyeing me warily, a product of whatever stories Diana had been telling him. Come in, I said warmly, ushering them inside. Dinner's almost ready. Diana looked around suspiciously, perhaps expecting to see police officers or lawyers waiting to ambush her. Instead, she found only a carefully prepared meal and a grandmother eager to see her grandchildren. The confrontation, when it came, was after the children were settled in the living room with a movie. I know everything, Diana, I said quietly, sliding a folder across the table. The gambling, the loans from Vincent Carrera, the lies you've spread about me. Her face drained of color. I don't know what you're Please don't insult my intelligence, I interrupted. Robert documented it all before he died. I found his storage unit. For a moment, genuine fear flashed in her eyes. Then her expression hardened. So what? It's your word against mine, and everyone already thinks you're losing your mind. I smiled then, a small, satisfied smile. Not anymore. I have a neurological workup proving I'm completely sound. I have statements from your sister confirming your history of manipulation. I have evidence that you owe $200,000 to a man connected to organized crime, and I have all of Robert's documentation. Her hands trembled as she reached for her wine glass. What do you want? A truce? I said simply, I don't want to destroy you. Diana, I just want to be part of my grandchildren's lives. I want the rumors to stop. I want peace. She studied me, perhaps searching for weakness or deception. And if I refuse, then I'll take everything I have to the police. The gambling might not be illegal, but the loans, the connection to Carrera, those will interest them very much, especially given the timing of Robert's death. Are you accusing me of... Her voice had risen in panic. I'm not accusing you of anything. I cut in. I'm simply stating facts. Robert confronted you about the gambling and loans 4 days before he died. He changed his will to protect the children's inheritance. And then he had a sudden cardiac event at 35. Diana collapsed back in her chair, her facade crumbling completely. For the first time, I saw the real woman beneath all the masks, frightened, desperate, cornered. "I didn't kill him," she whispered, tears streaking her makeup. "I swear I didn't. The stress, the fight we had maybe that contributed, but I never wanted him dead. I loved him, in my way." I studied her face, searching for truth in her eyes. To this day, I'm not sure if I believe her, but in that moment, I made a choice for peace, for my grandchildren, for my own future. "Here's what's going to happen," I told her. "I'm going to pay off your debt to Carrera, not for you, but to get that kind of criminal element away from my grandchildren. In exchange, you will give me regular, unhindered access to Sophie and Mason. You will stop spreading rumors about me, and you will seek treatment for your gambling addiction." She agreed immediately, relief flooding her face. I think she'd expected much worse. As she left that night, the children sleeping in the back seat of her car, I felt no triumph, only a weary recognition that this was just the beginning of a long road ahead, one where we would all have to find a way to coexist for the sake of two innocent children caught in the crossfire of adult mistakes. Now, 3 years later, on a warm spring afternoon, I sit in my garden watching Sophie and Mason play. They spend weekends with me now, a schedule we settled on after Diana completed her treatment program. She still lives in Robert's house, but it's in my name a fact that ensures her continued cooperation. The rose bushes Robert and I planted together years ago are in full bloom, their fragrance filling the air. I've added new varieties each year, a way of keeping him present in the space we both loved. "Grandma, look," Sophie calls, holding up a small ceramic pot. At 12, she's showing real talent for pottery, a hobby we discovered together. "I made this for Mom's birthday." I smile, examining the delicately crafted bowl. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. She'll love it." Mason, now 9, is sprawled on the grass nearby, deep in a book about dinosaurs. He looks so much like Robert at that age that sometimes it catches my breath. Our relationship with Diana remains complicated. The trust that was shattered can never be fully repaired, but we've reached a kind of peace, a détente built on mutual understanding. She knows I hold her secrets. I know she's capable of incredible deception, but we both love these children, and that common ground has become our foundation. The money that caused so much strife has found better purpose. I've established trust funds for Sophie and Mason, just as Robert wanted. I've renovated my home to include special spaces for them, a pottery studio for Sophie, a reading nook for Mason, and I've set aside funds for Diana's ongoing treatment, ensuring she can manage the addiction that nearly destroyed all our lives. Sometimes I wonder what Robert would think of this arrangement. Would he approve of the compromise I reached with Diana? Would he understand why I chose not to pursue the question of his death more aggressively? I like to believe he would. My son was always practical, always compassionate. He changed his will, not out of vindictiveness, but out of love, to protect what mattered most. Last week, I finally fulfilled a promise I'd made to Robert years ago. We'd always talked about visiting Italy together, exploring the hills of Tuscany, the villages where our ancestors had lived. With Sophie and Mason beside me, I scattered a small portion of his ashes beneath an ancient olive tree, its silvery leaves shimmering in the breeze. "Is Dad happy here, Grandma?" Mason had asked, his small hand gripping mine. "I think he is," I'd answered, watching as the wind carried the ashes into the Italian countryside. "But he's happiest knowing we're together, that we're taking care of each other." The children and I have started a new tradition. Each year on Robert's birthday, we plant something new in my garden, a tree, a rose bush, a bed of his favorite flowers. This living memorial grows more beautiful each year, nurtured by our hands and our memories. Life after loss isn't about forgetting. It's not even about forgiving. Sometimes. It's about finding a way forward that honors what was lost while embracing what remains. The garden of my life was scorched and barren after Robert died, after Diana's betrayal, but slowly, season by season, it's growing again different than before, but no less beautiful. Tonight, as the children help me prepare dinner in my kitchen, laughing and arguing and creating the beautiful chaos of family, I feel Robert's presence in the rhythm of our lives. He is here in Sophie's smile, in Mason's thoughtful frown, in the legacy of love that no deception could ever truly destroy. This is his last gift to me, this second chance at family, this hard-won peace, and I intend to cherish every moment of it. On the first anniversary of Robert's death, I sat alone by his grave, running my fingers over the cool marble of his headstone. "Your children miss you," I whispered. "I miss you." The cemetery was quiet that morning, dew still clinging to the grass, the rising sun casting long shadows across the rows of stones. I had brought fresh flowers, lilies, his favorite, and arranged them carefully in the built-in vase. It was hard to believe a year had passed since that awful day in the funeral home when I'd overheard Diana's cruel words. So much had changed. So much had been revealed. The truce Diana and I had forged was holding, though not without occasional strain. She had completed an intensive treatment program for gambling addiction, attending weekly support group meetings with a reluctance that gradually gave way to genuine participation. The therapy seemed to be working. Marcus had reported no new gambling activity, no suspicious financial transactions. Our arrangement was straightforward. I maintained legal ownership of the house where she and the children lived, paid her a monthly allowance that covered their expenses, and funded separate accounts for the children's education and activities. In return, Diana ensured I had regular time with Sophie and Mason weekends, holidays, and one dinner each week. She had also, as agreed, stopped spreading rumors about me in the community. Some relationships were beyond repair. Mrs. Pembroke and several others from my old bridge club still averted their eyes when we crossed paths at the grocery store. But other friendships had been mended. Barbara had become a fierce advocate for me, correcting misinformation whenever she heard it. You wouldn't believe the things Diana was saying. She'd tell people, shaking her head. None of it was true. Irene is as sharp as ever. Dr. Bennett had been more difficult. When I'd returned to his office with Dr. Carlson's neurological assessment, he'd been defensive at first, insisting he was only acting out of concern. You put your medical judgment aside because of gossip. I'd told him, my voice level but firm, you owed me better than that after 20 years. He'd apologized eventually, but our relationship remained formal, professional, where it had once been warm. The greatest healing, though, had come with the children. At first, they'd been cautious around me, confused by the tension between their mother and grandmother, unsure what to believe. Diana, to her credit, had stopped poisoning them against me. Slowly, weekend by weekend, we rebuilt our bond. Sophie was the first to fully return to me, her natural openness reasserting itself once the negative influences faded. She began bringing her schoolwork, her art projects, her daily triumphs and struggles for my input. Mason took longer, watching me carefully for months before deciding I was still the grandmother who had taught him to fish, who knew exactly how he liked his pancakes, who never tired of reading him the same dinosaur books over and over again. Now, a year later, they were flourishing despite everything. Sophie had discovered a passion for pottery after I enrolled her in classes at the community center. Mason's reading skills had advanced far beyond his grade level, nurtured by our weekly trips to the library. They spoke of their father often, keeping his memory alive in stories and questions that sometimes brought tears to my eyes. Was Dad afraid of thunderstorms like me? Mason had asked one night during a particularly loud summer storm. No, I'd smiled, pulling him closer under the blanket fort we'd built in the living room. But he was terrified of spiders, even tiny ones. He used to make me catch them in cups and take them outside. Sophie had laughed. I remember he would stand on a chair and point until you got it. These moments were precious, each one a small victory over the tragedy that had befallen us. As I sat by Robert's grave that morning, I made him a promise. I'll make sure they know who you were, I said softly. Not just the father who loved them, but the man who tried to do the right thing, who faced difficult truths, who protected them even when it meant making painful decisions. I had decided not to tell the children about Diana's gambling, about the loans, about my suspicions regarding their father's death. Perhaps someday, when they were older, the full truth might be necessary. But for now, they needed stability, needed to believe in both their parents, needed a childhood unburdened by adult failings. Rising from the bench, I placed my hand on the headstone one last time. Rest easy, son, I whispered. I've got them, and somehow we're all going to be okay. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. The path ahead was not the one I would have chosen, but it was one I could walk with dignity, with purpose, with love. And in its own way, that was a gift, perhaps the last gift from a son who had always known, somehow, that I was stronger than I believed myself to be. The evening of my planned confrontation with Diana arrived with a sense of inevitability. I had spent days preparing gathering evidence, rehearsing what I would say, steeling my nerves for whatever reaction might come. As I set the table with my best dishes, I felt an odd calm settle over me. The truth was finally going to come to light one way or another. I had prepared Robert's favorite meal pot roast with roasted potatoes, carrots glazed with maple syrup, and homemade rolls. It was comfort food, the kind that filled the house with aromas that triggered memories. I wanted the children to feel safe here, to associate my home with warmth and love, not with the tension that had been building between their mother and me. When the doorbell rang precisely at 6:30, I smoothed my hands over my apron and went to answer it. Diana stood on my porch looking flawless, as always perfectly styled hair, tasteful makeup, designer clothes that somehow made even casual wear look elegant. Behind her, Sophie bounced excitedly while Mason hung back, clutching a video game console. Grandma, Sophie launched herself into my arms, and I held her tight, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood. This moment right here was what I was fighting for. Come in, I said, ushering them all inside. Dinner's almost ready. Diana's eyes darted around my living room as though expecting to find police officers or lawyers waiting. Instead, she saw only a carefully set table and a grandmother eager to see her grandchildren. Her shoulders relaxed fractionally, though the wariness never left her eyes. Dinner went better than I had dared hope. The children chatted about school, about friends, about the 1,000 important details that make up a child's world. Diana participated minimally, offering tight smiles and brief responses when directly addressed. I kept the conversation light, focused on the children, saving the confrontation for after they were occupied elsewhere. When dinner was finished, I suggested the children watch a movie in the den. "I've got that new animated film you've been wanting to see. Sophie," I said, "and plenty of popcorn." The children needed no further encouragement. Once they were settled, the sound of the movie providing background noise, I turned to Diana across the kitchen table. "I know everything," I said without preamble, keeping my voice low but firm. I slid a folder across the table. The gambling, the loans from Vincent Carrera, the lies you've spread about me. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "I don't know what you're—" "Please don't," I interrupted, raising a hand. "Don't insult my intelligence. Robert documented it all before he died. I found his storage unit." For a moment, genuine fear flashed in her eyes. Then her expression hardened like setting concrete. "So what? It's your word against mine. Everyone already thinks you're losing your mind." I allowed myself a small smile then, feeling no triumph but a certain vindication. "Not anymore. I have a complete neurological workup proving I'm mentally sound. I have statements from your sister confirming your history of manipulation. I have evidence that you owe $200,000 to a man connected to organized crime. And I have all of Robert's documentation." I leaned forward slightly, including the video he made explaining why he changed his will. Her hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "What do you want?" The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? Revenge, justice, to see her punished in the weeks since discovering the full extent of Diana's deception. I had cycled through all those emotions. But looking at her now, seeing not just the manipulative woman who had tried to destroy me, but also the mother of my grandchildren, I knew what mattered most. "A truce," I said simply. "I don't want to destroy you, Diana. I just want to be part of my grandchildren's lives. I want the rumors to stop. I want peace." And as she studied me, perhaps searching for weakness or an ulterior motive, "And if I refuse, then I'll take everything I have to the police," I replied evenly. The gambling might not be illegal, but the loans from Carrera, the connection to organized crime, those will interest them very much, especially given the timing of Robert's death. "Are you accusing me of—" Her voice had risen in panic. "I'm not accusing you of anything," I cut in firmly. "I'm simply stating facts. Robert confronted you about the gambling and loans 4 days before he died. He changed his will to protect the children's inheritance. And then he had a sudden cardiac event at 35. Diana collapsed back in her chair, her facade crumbling completely. For the first time, I saw the real woman beneath all the masks, frightened, desperate, cornered. "I didn't kill him," she whispered, tears streaking her makeup. "I swear I didn't. The stress, the fight we had, maybe that contributed. But I never wanted him dead. I loved him, in my way." I studied her face, searching for truth in her eyes. To this day, I'm not sure if I believe her, but in that moment, I made a choice for peace, for my grandchildren, for my own future. "Here's what's going to happen," I told her. "I'm going to pay off your debt to Carrera, not for you, but to get that kind of criminal element away from my grandchildren. In exchange, you will give me regular, unhindered access to Sophie and Mason. You will stop spreading rumors about me, and you will seek treatment for your gambling addiction." I paused, making sure my next words landed with appropriate weight. And the house stays in my name. She agreed immediately, relief flooding her face. I think she'd expected much worse. We spent the next hour hammering out the details: visitation schedules, financial arrangements, treatment options. By the time the movie ended and the children tumbled back into the kitchen looking for dessert, we had reached an understanding, not friendship, not forgiveness, but a workable peace. As they prepared to leave that night, Sophie hugged me tightly. "Can we come back tomorrow, Grandma? You promised to teach me how to make those cookies." I looked at Diana, a silent question. She nodded, the barest concession. "We'll come after lunch." It was a beginning. 3 years have passed since that fateful dinner with Diana. The seasons have cycled through winter barrenness to spring, promise to summer abundance, and back again, much like the emotions that have carried us all through this journey of grief, betrayal, and tentative healing. On a particularly golden afternoon in late September, my garden has become a sanctuary of life and color. The rose bushes Robert and I planted together years ago are in their second bloom of the season, their fragrance mingling with the earthy scent of fall. I've added new varieties each year, a climbing Cecile Brunner along the fence, a deep crimson Mr. Lincoln by the patio, a butter yellow Julia Child near the reading bench, each one a silent testament to continuation, to growth despite loss. Sophie and Mason are with me today, as they are most weekends now. Our arrangement with Diana has evolved into a reliable rhythm. The children spend weekends with me, Wednesday evenings for dinner, and 2 weeks during summer vacation. Diana still lives in Robert's house now, legally, mine a condition that ensures her continued cooperation. She's maintained her end of our bargain, completing a treatment program for gambling addiction and attending weekly support meetings. According to my occasional check-ins with Marcus, she's remained clean of gambling activities. "Grandma, look," Sophie calls, holding up a small ceramic pot. At 12, she's blossoming into a thoughtful young lady with a genuine talent for pottery, a hobby we discovered together at the Community Arts Center. "I made this for Mom's birthday." I smile, examining the delicately crafted bowl with its swirling glaze of blues and greens. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. She'll love it." And Sophie beams with pride, carefully placing the bowl back in its protective wrapping. "Do you think Dad would have liked it too?" The question catches me off guard, as mentions of Robert sometimes do little emotional ambushes that can still bring tears to my eyes without warning. "He would have treasured it," I tell her honestly. "He always said you had an artist's eye, even when you were tiny." Mason, now 9, is sprawled on the grass nearby, deep in a book about dinosaurs. He looks so much like Robert at that age that sometimes it catches my breath, the same serious furrow between his brows when he concentrates, the same habit of running his fingers through his hair when he's thinking. He's grown from the uncertain 6-year-old who once eyed me warily into a curious, kind-hearted boy who brings home injured birds and researches how to help them. "Did you know," he announces without looking up from his book, "that some dinosaurs evolved into birds? So technically, dinosaurs aren't really extinct." "Is that right?" I reply, exchanging an amused glance with Sophie. Mason's dinosaur obsession shows no sign of waning, and his collection of facts grows by the day. Our relationship with Diana remains complicated. The trust that was shattered can never be fully repaired. But we've reached a kind of peace, a détente, built on mutual understanding. She knows I hold her secrets. I know she's capable of incredible deception. But we both love these children, and that common ground has become our foundation. The money that caused so much strife has found better purpose. I've established robust trust funds for Sophie and Mason, just as Robert wanted, ensuring they'll have resources for college and beyond. I've renovated my home to include special spaces for them, a pottery studio for Sophie in the converted sunroom, a reading nook for Mason in the bay window of what was once the formal dining room. I've even set aside funds for Diana's ongoing treatment, ensuring she can manage the addiction that nearly destroyed all our lives. Sometimes I wonder what Robert would think of this arrangement. Would he approve of the compromise I reached with Diana? Would he understand why I chose not to pursue the question of his death more aggressively? I like to believe he would. My son was always practical, always compassionate. He changed his will not out of vindictiveness, but out of love, to protect what mattered most. Last month, I finally fulfilled a promise I'd made to Robert years ago. We'd always talked about visiting Italy together, exploring the hills of Tuscany, the villages where our ancestors had lived. With Sophie and Mason beside me, I scattered a small portion of his ashes beneath an ancient olive tree, its silvery leaves shimmering in the breeze. "Is Dad happy here?" Grandma, Mason had asked, his small hand gripping mine. "I think he is," I'd answered, watching as the wind carried the ashes into the Italian countryside. "But he's happiest knowing we're together, that we're taking care of each other." The children and I have started a new tradition. Each year on Robert's birthday, we plant something new in my garden: a tree, a rose bush, a bed of his favorite sunflowers. This living memorial grows more beautiful each year, nurtured by our hands and our memories. Life after loss isn't about forgetting. It's not even about forgiving. Sometimes it's about finding a way forward that honors what was lost while embracing what remains. The garden of my life was scorched and barren after Robert died, after Diana's betrayal, but slowly, season by season, it's growing again, different than before, but no less beautiful. Tonight, as the children help me prepare dinner in my kitchen, laughing and arguing and creating the beautiful chaos of family, I feel Robert's presence in the rhythm of our lives. He is here in Sophie's artistic hands, in Mason's curious mind, in the legacy of love that no deception could ever truly destroy. This is his last gift to me, this second chance at family, this hard-won peace, and I intend to cherish every moment of it. Tonight, as the stars emerge above my garden, I watch Sophie and Mason chase fireflies across the lawn. Their laughter carries on the evening breeze, a sound that once seemed impossible in the depths of our shared grief. I think about the journey that brought us here, from that devastating moment in the funeral home when I overheard Diana's cruel words, through the discovery of Robert's evidence, to this hard-won peace we've crafted from the ruins of betrayal. Last week, I fulfilled a promise I made to Robert years ago. We'd always dreamed of visiting Italy together, exploring the hills of Tuscany where our ancestors once lived. With Sophie and Mason beside me, I scattered a portion of his ashes beneath an ancient olive tree, its silver leaves dancing in the Mediterranean breeze. "Is Dad happy here?" Grandma, Mason asked, his small hand warm in mine. "I think he is," I answered truthfully, watching the wind carry those ashes into the Italian countryside. "But he's happiest knowing we're together, that we're taking care of each other." These children, Robert's living legacy, are thriving despite everything. They are my reminder that even from our deepest wounds, new life can grow. My journey has taught me that true strength isn't found in revenge or bitterness, but in the courage to fight for what matters when everything seems lost. When life shatters your expectations, When people you trusted reveal themselves as strangers, you discover who you truly are. The darkest moments in our lives don't define us. They simply reveal the depth of our capacity to endure, to adapt, and ultimately to rebuild. Like my garden after a harsh winter, we can bloom again differently perhaps, but no less beautifully. What seems like an ending can become a beginning if we're brave enough to take that first step forward. The path isn't easy. There are days when grief still catches my breath, when memories ambush me with their bittersweet sting. But through it all, I've learned that love in all its messy, complicated forms remains the most powerful force for healing. What unexpected lessons have life's challenges taught you? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience and renewal. Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if my journey has touched your heart, consider subscribing to join our community of survivors and hope finders. Together, we can remind each other that even after the darkest night, dawn always comes.